What's funny is I pulled a lot of people within real estate, within entrepreneurship, people that run fantastic businesses, have never had a W-2 job. And I was genuinely curious to know what they thought of my situation, if I should leave or not. This might be surprising, but every single one of those guys said you should stay at that job and you should continue to do that while you're building your business, because I was doing both at the same time for a while.
Mhm.
And the only person that saw really how I felt about it and what it was doing to my soul was my wife. She was like, you should go do it. So it took me a long time to get to that realization myself, years where
Mm.
I would say, hey, 6 months from now, that's the day I'll leave.
Mhm.
They would get there. I'd say, you know what? I can do another 6 months, do it,
Mhm.
repeat. Ultimately, it just felt like there's the financial aspect, which everybody focuses on. That's important. I was lucky enough to be in a job where I was paid really well. We saved quite well and we invested everything. Felt like at the absolute least was buying myself quite a long runway there, if not being pretty good to go. That doesn't fix the anxiety you have in leaving something that's so stable and safe.
Mhm.
There's really no amount of money that can fix that.
Are you a hardworking dad, juggling family responsibilities while dreaming of building wealth through real estate? Welcome to the Invested Fathers Podcast, where we explore how to balance investing and fatherhood. I'm your host, Kenny Johnson, founder of East West Capital. Over the past 5 years, I've been buying real estate to free up my time and secure my family's future. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Join me as we navigate the real estate world together, building wealth and strengthening our families. As my grandma always said, East West, home's best. TJ Burns in the house. TJ, thanks for joining the Invested Fathers Podcast. You said you weren't feeling great today. Sorry, man. How's your morning started out?
Yeah. Hey, Kenny, thanks for having me. I don't know. I think it's a head cold. I honestly probably got it from my son, as parents are susceptible to all those germs that our kids carry. I think I'll pull through, but if I sound a little nasally, that's the reason.
Okay. I got a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we don't get sick like a ton, but I feel like whenever I hear there's like a sick family or my parents have someone they're babysitting, there's a little bit of a, okay, we're not going to be around for a bit so that we can avoid, but at the end of the day, kids just get sick and they bring it home. That's part of being a dad. So right into the episode, Invested Fathers. I'm going to just start off different than I usually do, TJ. A key takeaway we can just start the episode off with, we haven't even heard your story yet, but what's something that you'd love to bring to the audience of dads out there, of things that you're working on or you can just give as a value?
Yeah, in terms of things I'm working on, I just left my W-2 job to run my business full time. So it's a real estate focused business. The reason that I did that was because 7 years ago, my wife and I decided, really about the time I got my first job out of college, that once we had kids, we wanted to own our time. We wanted to spend as much time with those kids as we possibly could. And thankfully, my wife's also followed that path. So she's around quite a bit. She's with my son all the time, my son being 16 months old. And now I'm in the same position. Of course, I work extremely hard on my business, but I get to decide when I go to the park, when I have meals with my family, when I work super late to further what I'm trying to do. So I guess the takeaway would be, the way I feel is that having children is one of the most purposeful things you can do. So having kids and raising them right, it's extremely important. It's good for you. It's good for the world. And the more time you can spend with your kids when they're young, when they're very impressionable, when they really need you as a parent, the better. And that's been my North Star for a long time.
Great. No, the freedom of time to be with your family. And you said your son is 16 months old.
That's right.
I feel like I missed the first 3 years of my son's life. Now, my wife was at home full time with him. And I actually just talked to her last night about this. And she said she loved those days of just her and him and just that bonding that happened. But I think those years, if you miss them, you definitely won't get them back. The key is to make today count. So I love that even as a young dad with young kids that you're raising now, and I haven't arrived by any means, but you're showing your values and your priorities. You said 7 years ago, your wife and you talked about this. That's great, man. You're putting into action some of these values. I want to dive a little bit into that business that you talked about, leaving your W-2, or tell us what you were doing and what are you doing now? And how has that been a shift around the house with your wife?
Definitely. Yeah. What I was doing, I was working at Amazon as an engineer when I left. Right out of college, I got a job at a startup. That startup got acquired by Amazon, put me on a nice fast track to have a lot of impact in what I was doing. I was making consumer electronic devices, think smart home cameras, doorbells. That was great for a really long time. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was make things. And I was pretty good at math too, which helped. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was growing. I lost a little bit of passion for what I was doing. It got very repeatable for me. And naturally, when businesses get big, they add a lot of process, right? I still love the people I worked with, but I felt like I was just a paper pusher in a lot of ways. And I stuck around because I was paid really well. I had a lot of the perks that everybody wants. I worked entirely from home. When I left, I had great vacation, great benefits, but I still really wasn't enjoying myself and thought about that for quite a long time, if it was the right decision to leave or not. And along the way, I was getting interested in what else could I do that would provide for my family and give me that purpose and growth that I was looking for. And started researching real estate right about the same time I got that job. I remember walking into my cubicle and instantly feeling like this is great. I'm sure there's a journey ahead of me here, but this isn't it. I got to find something else that I own my time and I can own the upside. Spent a number of years browsing around in different real estate markets and asset classes, started experimenting with different strategies, bought some small multifamily that I lived in and managed, did the short-term rental thing on a very small scale through one of those multifamily properties. I got my realtor license, sold some houses. I did a flip out of state. It wasn't meant to be a flip, but it just worked out that way. And then also got introduced to syndications and funds just in a very random way. I found a wallet on the street, and that really worked for me. It really worked for who I was at that time, the busy professional that just wanted to invest cash with somebody that they trusted. And it's probably part of the reason why I have so much conviction in my business now, is because that is the path that I followed in order to get to where I wanted to be, where I had more financial stability, that I could walk away from a job that everybody told me I was crazy to leave just because my heart wasn't in it and my heart was in this new thing that I was building.
Elaborate a bit on that wallet story. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, so I was living in Boston at the time, and I was walking home from a friend's house. This is going back late 2019. And I'm walking along the street. It's dark, and I see a lump in the street. Definitely not garbage. And so I go up to it, and it's a wallet. My first thought is, okay, why don't I figure out who this belongs to so I can give it back to them? So I pull up the person on Google. I go on Instagram, and I find that the person's a real estate investor. And not only that, they're about the same age as me. It almost feels like it's an alternate persona on if I had, instead of gone and got a job out of college, I had the conviction to go and bet on myself right away. Because while I graduated and I went the traditional route, this individual tried brokerage for a bit and then just went all in on real estate, finding deals, funding them creatively, and just gutting it out with all the ups and downs that come with that. And it was all captured on their Instagram. So I went home and I looked through their Instagram for 2 or 3 hours. Honestly, at that time, I didn't really have the confidence in real estate to confidently reach out and say something like, I want to get involved. Because I didn't really know what I was doing at that point. It was before all the deals I had done, before I really felt like I spoke the language. But my wife encouraged me to. And when I gave the fellow his wallet back, I just said, hey, if you're ever looking for somebody to write a check and partner with you that way, that's probably the only way I can add value to what you're doing, but I'd be willing to. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's actually something that real estate investors are looking for. They need money. Mm-hmm. And that started my relationship with that individual, where I was a passive investor in a number of their deals. And I got to cut my teeth in doing deals with them, and then investing in other deals and seeing the ups and downs and making some mistakes along the way. And then eventually I came to the conclusion that I was seeing in the marketplace, I felt like I could do a better job. Maybe not with that individual specifically, because I still work with him and he's a stud. But other people out there, I was like, man, I think I know enough about this business. I think I have the drive and the conviction and the ability to learn where I can compete well and offer a better product to those folks that are in my shoes, that are looking for something like what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And that's the genesis of what I'm doing now.
I love that story. If only I just feel like if I'm interviewing the other guy, who is the stud. The title would be something like, I lost my wallet and gained hundreds of thousands of dollars through an investor or something.
Yeah, it's funny because he's gone on the podcast and told his side. He's still very active. I'm one small part of his story, but obviously
No, it's great, man.
he was the genesis of my story.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes these things aren't accidents. I'm a believer in God's plan being not happenstance. So that's awesome that you were in Boston walking the streets that one night. Okay, TJ, thank you for sharing sort of the background. I like that you said, I like to build things. You knew, it sounds like entering your job at Amazon, this wasn't going to be it, but there was a paycheck, there was some security. It sounds like you were living comfortably. Wasn't like you had to change. It wasn't like you were back against the wall, but you knew you wanted some more time freedom and you went the active investor route even a month and a half ago, now doing this full time. Talk to me about the family. You mentioned your wife, you have a 16-month-old. This is where I feel like not everyone's going to do what you did in regards to quitting their W-2. And I would give my message to the audience, you shouldn't do this. And not everyone needs to do what TJ's doing. But on the dad front, talk to me about communication with your wife, some fears. Your son is here. What did that look like through your journey as a businessman?
So we've been working towards this for a really long time. And my wife and I have been talking about it for a really long time. We've been together since I was 16. We go way back, and our dreams were always combined in that way, in some sense. What's funny is I pulled a lot of people within real estate, within entrepreneurship, people that run fantastic businesses, have never had a W-2 job. And I was genuinely curious to know what they thought of my situation, if I should leave or not. This might be surprising, but every single one of those guys said you should stay at that job. And you should continue to do that while you're building your business, because I was doing both at the same time for a while. Mm-hmm. And the only person that saw really how I felt about it and what it was doing to my soul was my wife. She was like, you should go do it. So it took me a long time to get to that realization myself, years where I would say, hey, today's the day, or not really, 6 months from now, that's the day I'll leave. Mm-hmm. They would get there. I'd say, you know what, I can do another 6 months, do it. Mm-hmm. Repeat. Ultimately, it just felt like there's the financial aspect, which everybody focuses on. That's important. I was lucky enough to be in a job where I was paid really well. We saved quite well, and we invested everything. Felt like, at the absolute least, was buying myself quite a long runway there, if not being pretty good to go. That doesn't fix the anxiety you have in leaving something that's so stable and safe. Mm-hmm. There's really no amount of money that can fix that. Ultimately, for me, I just felt like I was, one, not being true to myself and leaving an opportunity on the table that might turn into something great. And a month into it, I feel like that's been correct. There's been challenges, but I have the conviction to continue to do what I'm doing, and I've found success, and it's been nice to focus all my energy. And then the other part of it was I just felt like I wasn't being a good teammate to my coworkers. Mm-hmm. Right? My heart really wasn't in it, and I couldn't get my brain to do what needed to be done every day. It was the strangest thing to me, because I've always been a bit of a hard worker, but I'd show up to my desk and I just feel like there's rocks in my brain. And that was my feelings. My coworkers said, you're good, stick around, we want you here. But I just felt like if I did that too long, it was not helping me. I almost felt like I had to leave.
What I love about that story was you mentioned who was in your corner. And after seeking advice and counsel, I have a similar story, but it wasn't Amazon. It was landscaping sales rep. But there was a year and a half of, in my head, is this smart? Is this good? I'm trying some things while I'm working. No man can serve two masters a little bit. There was a conversation my boss had with me, and he said, we just need to know, is this your plan A or your plan B? And that conversation is when I decided this is my plan B. It was like there was a crossroads at that point. So I love that your wife was your biggest advocate in saying, I see you at home. Like, I know you're like meant for this. You need to do this. And again, that's just encouraging. And I feel like as husbands, when your wife is like on board with what you're doing, you're just like an unstoppable, like Rocky Balboa going at it with Adrian, like cheering for you kind of deal. So really cool to hear. I want to take a few steps back. Growing up in the TJ Burns household, give us like a high level snapshot of what was your dad like? Was he entrepreneurial? Was he also someone who liked to build things? And how did your upbringing help define who you are now?
My parents were small business owners. They owned a small insurance agency that mostly dealt with the police. So like FOP, PBA. My dad was around for everything. He coached me in all the sports. We got to take decent amount of vacations as kids and spent a lot of family time with them. My mom worked in that same business, but she also was home full time with us. They tried to give us everything that we could possibly need, maybe even too much, to the point where somewhere along the way, I just remember feeling I got to make it happen on my own. I think my parents will give me the world if I let them, but I always had the desire to self actualize, to figure out. And I love to learn things, love to play sports. My dad played rugby for 30 years, which is
30
got to be a little
years.
crazy.
Yeah.
He played in college and met all of his best friends doing that, played at the state school. So they were all from where I grew up and where my dad grew up. So when they came back from college, they all stayed very close. They lived together. They played in the local league together. And then every summer, we'd pack up and we'd go up to upstate New York, where there was a rugby tournament every year. I have memories of my dad training for that rugby tournament every year. Probably like March, April would come around, and we'd head up to the turf with him, and he'd be doing sprints, and we'd be doing the sprints with him. So that definitely left an impression on me because I played sports my whole life, all the way through college. And I think part of that was just learning the importance of not quitting on things.
Mhm.
If anything bothers me in the world, it's quitting stuff. And sometimes there's a time for quitting. With Amazon, I felt like that time had come, but I don't get there easy. It takes me a long time to get to the point where I'm not in my head calling myself a quitter. And instead, I'm like, no, this is what you need to do.
What is it? Was there a story in regards to you did quit something, or your dad was just like, you just saw maybe your dad training something that caused you to that be a core value?
I think with sports, and this ties in with being a dad, like I think sports are so good for adversity, like creating controlled adversity for kids.
Mhm.
And it's something I've thought a bit about too, because if this business pans out and it does quite well, I think my kids will be in a good position. One of my fears is I don't want my kids to not have adversity, because that builds character. It forms you into who you are. And I have memories of playing sports and being gassed, being on the sprint line, being all beat up in football, and just knowing like that you can't quit at that moment. Either the game's not over and you're playing DN and they're still running the ball at you every play because they know you're hurting, or you're on the sprint line and you don't know when the coach is going to call practice, and just being totally done, but knowing like, hey, I just got to keep going. I saw it with my dad and the sports he played. And then when I played sports, I guess I emulated that in a bit, in some way.
Okay, so I'm tying this into husband card and dad card. Your son is too young to really have these deep conversations about quitting. I'm not sure when you're going to throw him in the first sports league and running, but hey, it could be tomorrow. Uh, but in light of adversity and that sort of grit, I think, spirit that you're talking about, how has that played out in your marriage or other hats that you're wearing outside of athletics and business?
Yeah. In my marriage, we've been together for almost 13 years now, all through late teens, early 20s. I went to school up in Boston. She was down in Long Island. She moved up to Boston after that. And all the ups and downs that come with life, right? Like that's all baked in there. And thankfully, I picked somebody that also values not quitting and getting through adversity and has the same values as me, because we never would have made it if it wasn't for that. And it wasn't really a conscious decision on either of our part to figure out who our life partner was going to be at 16, but it just happened, right? Maybe God puts people in your path and they help you grow as a person. So she has the same values as me there.
Yeah, just the idea of quitting and the lessons learned there.
My business as well. I think it's not an easy business to be in where you're raising money from people. So what I do today is we buy multifamily and we invest in credit funds. So a little bit of a different profile. They appeal to different types of investors, but a big part of all that is raising money from people. It's a high reward business. It's one where you have to run it with a lot of integrity, find good partners and do good deals. And sometimes things don't go right. For me, I think those lessons of not quitting ring in the back of my head whenever things come up. and you start to have doubts and you start to feel like, are you on the right path? Because I haven't been doing this just for a year. I've been in this business alongside Amazon for almost 3 years now. But I'm glad I have those feelings and knowing that it's just all a part of the game, right? You're going to go through ups and downs and you're going to feel like you want to quit at times. And really the only way to lose is by quitting or running out of money.
Yeah, I look at you, I hear you, and I think to myself, there's things that you will not allow to happen for your family, and that listening to the sports stories and who your dad was, your self actualization, I think was the term you used, sounds like a recipe for success. And does that mean you're going to be Mr. Golden Boy, whatever you touch, just instant money? No, but that's life. And that's part of enjoying life. In fact, I wanted to go there. I feel like there is a thought that you have to choose business or your family. You can't do both. One is going to succeed or one is going to fail. I just read a book called Relentless. I think it's Tim Grover. He was the coach for Michael Jordan. And he was like, hey, if you're going to be relentless in life, like you got to basically sacrifice all these other things to get this thing. So talk to me a little bit about your motivations, but also your take on, can you have both a successful business and a successful family? Is that possible?
Short answer, yeah, I think absolutely. And I think they help each other quite a bit. Sometimes I'll have the thought experiment in my head of what would my business and my life look like if I wasn't married now, if I didn't have a child, if I was just, so I'm 29 right now, just hyper focused on building this business and I had no other distractions. Being a dad, it's more than a full-time job. The way I feel about it is maybe in a perfect world, that'd be true because I'd have more time, but I don't think that I would have the values that I have. I don't think that I would know what responsibility really feels like without this experience of being a dad. I don't think I would have as much discipline. Being a dad and being a husband, it teaches you all these life lessons that are super important for business. Maybe the most important things in business are your values. I wouldn't have as strong of a value system if I didn't have the daily training of wanting to be a good dad and a good husband and what that comes with. Like being focused on that, being disciplined in that, not doing the things that maybe I want to do every day in the moment, like seeing my friends or playing sports or, being able to deal with adversity that comes up with family life. It's all related. Yeah, I think all the experiences have made me who I am. And you can't just take the bad of something out and think that the good's going to remain too.
What I heard is it's not like you can just separate out your life into compartments and be winning in each one when you take off. I'm not a dad right now. I'm starting to build a business. You are always wearing the dad hat and the business hat and the husband hat. And that's part of what the journey is. It's defining you for what your values are. And if you're like, listen, guys, you won't see me for a year. I'm going to work really hard, but this is for our future here. So good luck with raising this kid. Good luck with being not isolated. I got to build this business and this is going to help us later. A little bit of the Ebenezer Scrooge mentality. I think it's just a recipe for disaster, man. You're in the thick of it right now.
I had a thought going back to what I said in the beginning. You want to set a good foundation for your kids, and the first few years are really important for that. My wife and I recognize that, and we want to be present for him. And I think when we look at all the priorities in our life, my business and my family are very high, probably 1 and 2 right now. And we would let other things go before we interrupted those things. For instance, I'd start selling properties, liquidating and having more cash so I could use that to buy back time in different ways so I could spend time with my family or move in with our parents or something like that. I'm not afraid to go and do all those things that would still allow me to run the business the way I want to run it and also spend my time with my family the way I think I should.
I'll encourage you in this. Your son, who is very young right now, is going to be watching dad. And that can be scary because if you're short-tempered or impatient or just always having a bad day, that will affect him greatly. But seeing you put walk to your talk and living by faith is another way I'd like to put it. That can create a very powerful value in him as he grows up. TJ, we're wrapping up here, getting close, but I don't know if you want to call them life hacks, tips or tricks, things that are working for you right now. This doesn't have to be necessarily dad. It could be with your wife. It could be with your time. But what's something that's maybe like a light bulb moment or something like, man, this has been really helpful for me that I'd love to just share with everyone?
Yeah. I do want to say too that these podcasts always sound super, super great. Like I got everything together. This is more of like the aspirational of me and that part of me that's in my head. People should know too that this is I'm a work in progress like everybody else. But in terms of life hacks, I found getting up early is a big one. I feel better on the days I get up early. Maybe not always physically better, but mentally better. I'm more present for my family and in my business. Whatever time that is for you, like 2 hours before your kids get up, I treat that as my time where I try to go and work out or get some business tasks done. I think humor is important. It's one that I could probably work on a little bit more, but finding humor in the day to day and keeping a lighthearted attitude is a good way to not get so overwhelmed with things and in your head. And the two of the things my wife and I are working on, one is weekly dates,
Hmm.
because it's very easy to get caught up in all the things that need to be done in a business and then all the things that need to be done as a parent. And then you're left with no time and it's the end of the day and you're both exhausted. So for us, we've been trying to carve out some time each week to go take a hike or go to lunch sometime around noon each day when we still have a lot of energy. And then the last thing is lately we've been trying to figure out how to keep our phones away from our son. So much of my business is on my phone. And I want to be careful, and my wife want as well, about like having family time that is separate from electronics and then being able to use my phone for business stuff. It's incredibly difficult. And my son's already starting to notice the importance of these rectangles we carry around. But yeah, I see what happens in the world with kids who have phones. And I see the conundrum that parents face where their kids might be left out because they don't have a phone, or their kids really want a phone because they see mom and dad and how much they use their phones. I don't have a fix for that yet, and will probably be a challenge in the future. But that's something we're trying to do, is separate the phones a little bit from family time.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. I absolutely love what you're saying. And at 29 years old, just trying to figure this stuff out and knowing, at least knowing, being aware of the values that you have and you're trying to instill, and then working on those, discussing those with your wife. My kids go to bed and we basically recount the day on what went well, what didn't go well. And we just love talking about our kids, like my wife and I. Thank you for sharing all that. And I totally agree. The screens, we're in a space, Vested Fathers podcast. We don't have it all together. You mentioned that. We're all works in progress. I do believe there's strength in numbers. And by sharing what we're going through, what's in our head right now, creating that space where we can share these tips and tricks, life hacks, I think will make, at least with me and those listening, like this is one more step toward the right direction of what's working for this guy might work for me. I might try this. So thank you so much for those things. TJ, you know what? I don't think we mentioned this in my history with you, maybe your bio. Are you like marathon man, runner? What is the athletic? Give us like a 1 minute, like hobbies or like athletic things that you're into.
Yeah, I do have a lot of hobbies, right? I used to before kids, but I used to run marathons. I ran a couple marathons and then 50Ks, which is a little bit farther than a marathon, more like trail running. Last 18 months, I've been more into jujitsu, which has been my outlet. Played football and lacrosse all the way through my freshman year of college, and then just lacrosse onwards from there. I think I've scratched the itch for engineering and building things for now, but I like to tinker with stuff. I got a 3D printer in the background there. I have a lot of interest in climate related stuff. So like gardening, composting. And then I also like to scuba dive and snowboard when I possibly can. Did a whole bunch of diving up in Boston. When I lived there, we'd go out for lobsters. Right now, main hobby is being a dad and jujitsu.
Yeah.
Where I'm at.
No, I love knowing what else my guests are into. And I feel like that can resonate with different people out there. TJ, tell our audience, I see on LinkedIn, man, you're getting a lot of engagement. I think the story that you're unfolding for everybody with leaving this job and doing this thing, I think is resonating. How could our audience keep track of what you're up to?
Find me on LinkedIn, TJ Burns on LinkedIn. I post regularly there a couple times a week. And that's the best place to stay in touch with me. From there, you can get linked up in my investor portal. You'll see my website and you can get on my email list.
Cool. TJ, thanks so much for your time today. Good luck with the 16-month-old with this transition. Thank you so much for spending time to talk with us today.
My pleasure, Kenny. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Invested Fathers podcast. If you like this episode, we would love for you to click subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate all of your hard work as a father and look forward to our next episode together.